And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I know I said I was probably never going to talk about the ban list in Commander ever again, but in the last video I did, which I guess is maybe about a month ago now, I had a couple of comments on that video talking about Canadian Highlander and the point system, right? That might be the solution. And they said, so I guess this video is a little bit about, Canadian Highlander. Funny enough, I just made a video about Pauper Commander as well. So I'm branching out a little bit here. People mention things and I'm like, hey, maybe I should look into that. I didn't know anything about it. Canadian Highlander is essentially a mix of Vintage and Commander. You don't actually have a Commander. It's 2-player, but it is a 100-card singleton format, right? The banned list is the Vintage banned list, which of course is insane. And the Vintage ban list also, they have restricted cards, right? And a restricted card, of course, means you can only have one in your deck. So a Black Lotus, right? All the absurdly, the Moxes, the most absurdly busted cards in the history of the game, they're all restricted. So you can only have one in your deck. But of course, in a Highlander format, right? Commander being Elder Dragon Highlander, it is a Highlander format. It's a singleton format. You can only have one of each card in your deck. So something being restricted doesn't mean anything, right? It's not a restriction. And again, that's why a lot of people will say, okay, well, that's why the Moxes and all this stuff has to be banned in the Commander format. And as I've pointed out, I'm totally okay with whatever, but I'm not going to get into that. I did look at the points list, the system that they used for not really banned cards, just really powerful cards. Right? Because again, I've been pointed out so many times that the banned list in Commander is not for power level. That's not, you guys saying they need to ban this card because it's really powerful is silly. There is so many absurdly powerful cards in the Commander format already. They don't ban cards based on power level, okay? And obviously they don't do it in Canadian Highlander either. What they do is they use a point system based on the power level of those cards. And I think that's actually not a terrible idea. I know people are going to be downvoting this video right now before I even get into it. Because no, how dare you? That's a terrible idea. I think it's interesting. As I do a lot, I'm only doing this video for discussion purposes only. There's no chance this is ever going to happen. I just think it's an interesting thought experiment. And I think it's interesting the way that Canadian Highlander does this sort of power level point system. So let's take a look. So here it is. This is the actual page, Canadian Highlander. There can only be one. That's where the Highlander thing comes from, by the way. So points list. Each deck must contain a minimum of 100 cards and contain no more than one in any given card. I wonder, it says a minimum of 100 cards, so maybe you can have more than 100. Of course, in Commander, you can't have more than 100. You have to have exactly 100. The exceptions to this rule are basic lands, of course, and cards that explicitly state otherwise, e.g. Relentless Rats, right? Again, we all know that. Each deck may contain no more than a maximum of 10 points. So that is how their point system works. And of course, the majority of cards, in fact, every card except the ones on this list, are worth 0 points. So they don't count. So you can have Lightning Bolt, Counterspell, really good cards in the history of Magic. They're all worth 0 points. Okay. They're only applying points to the cards that are absurdly powerful, or what I noticed and what you may notice when you look at this list is the cards here are making it so that it's not so easy to go off or assemble a combo. That's the part I like about it. This, to me, this system, again, this is never going to happen, guys. And I'm not actually on the rules committee, so I don't have any say. So don't get mad at me for just having an opinion. But I think this solves a lot of problems in the Commander format. It solves 2 problems. One, it solves the, what I think, a lot of silly cards that don't need to be banned, personally. It also, what else does this solve? And I don't know if they actually do this in Canadian Highlander, because as I was looking at this list, I was like, okay, I have none of these cards in any of my decks. So all my decks would be a 0. I wonder if when you're playing Canadian Highlander, people ask you what power level, right? So this also solves the power level discussion, which power level is also, in my opinion, a broken system in the Commander format. I don't like the way the ban list works, and I don't like the way the power level thing works because, of course, it's all subject. You just say, oh, my deck's a 7, even though it's a 9, right? It's just your opinion. Here, there is no opinion, right? If you have an Ancestral Recall in your deck that's 8 points, There is no getting around that. So if someone says, what's the power level of your deck, you have to tell them what that number is. So I would tell someone, my Iname as one deck, for example, has none of these cards in it. I don't think. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. So therefore, it would be a 0. I would say it's a 0. All my decks, I'm pretty sure, are zeros. If your deck was a 10, then I would know that you are playing some really powerful cards. Or, again, what I consider to be combo enabling cards, right? So let's look at the list. Ancestral Recall is the most. This is the other part that I find very interesting about this. And obviously, this being a 2-player format is much, much different. You don't see, right? What are cards that are missing here that people often call to be banned? No Dockside Extortionist, right? Smothering Tithe is not on here because in a 2-player format, those cards just aren't that great. They're not nearly as good. Those cards are super good in a multiplayer format. That's what, Smothering Tithe obviously gets a lot worse once you only have one opponent left, right? Any card that is doing things depending on what your opponent, whenever opponent does this, obviously those cards are always better in the Commander format. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of tutors here. Again, I don't see certain tutors, though. Obviously, Demonic Tutor. They also have Mystical Tutor. Because those, like Mystical Tutor, tutors for really powerful combo pieces. No Enlightened Tutor, though. And Enlightened Tutor is pretty good, right? One of the most interesting things that I noticed right away, and I pointed this out on my last ban video, I tacked that on there, a pinned comment, is that, again, Soul Ring, as I've said many, many times, is I think it's better than the Moxes. And look at that. They have Soul Ring as a 4 here, and they have the Moxes as 3s. So a lot of people will say, hey, well, all your decks would be a 4, right? Because they have Soul Ring. No, they don't have Soul Ring. Natural Order, oh, wait, I do have Natural Order. I have Natural Order in my Tishana deck. So my Tishana deck would be a 2. I think I don't have Mystical Tutor in any decks. I think I might have. I don't anymore. Spellseeker. There you go. I have Spellseeker in my Denic deck, and I also have it in my Abishon deck. So there you go. There's, I have Soul Ring in my Omarthus deck. There we go. My colorless Omarthus deck would be a 4, which is kind of funny. I don't have Strip Mine in any decks. Yeah, most of these, I'm looking at, like, none of these. I don't play Underworld Breach, Vampiric Tutor, Wishclaw Talisman, funny enough. Any tutor that just tutors for any card, of course, is going to be on here. Obviously, I don't play Thassa's Oracle. That's a 7, right? So this is how it will work, right? And again, they're trying to break up the combo potential here, right? So you want to play Thassa's Oracle in your deck? Okay, that's a 7. Now you only have 3 left, right? That's how this works. You have 10 points and you're adding up here. So now if I want, and funny enough, they don't have Demonic Consultation on here, which I'm wondering what and I thought, okay, well, that's a little weird. They have Tainted Pact though. So I'm wondering, like, isn't Demonic Consultation just a better Tainted Pact? I don't know. That's a weird one. Tinker's only a 3. Wow. Okay. Again, True Name Nemesis is on here. This is a card printed in a Commander set that is, I never see it. It was played in Commander for a little while, but I never see it because, again, in a 4-player format, and of course this card's played in Legacy as well, because in a 2-player format, it's busted. Your opponent has a really hard time dealing with it. Really hard time dealing with it. In a 4-player format, it's just like, it's okay. Again, Umezawa's Jeet, same thing. A card played in Legacy, a card that maybe it's even played in Vintage. By the way, 20 life as well is something. This is only a 20 life format, not 40. True Name Nemesis and Umezawa's Jit, just very good cards in 2-player formats. In a 4-player format, the usability goes way down. So obviously this would be very different if it was, a 4-player format. And if you were doing this in Commander, you would change it considerably. Probably the ones that I pick out that are really noticeable for me are, of course, they have the Moxes rated lower than Soul Ring, and I completely agree. And in fact, Soul Ring to me probably would be the same. And look at Mana Vault's only a 1, right? Everyone complains about Mana Vault. That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this list. Wow, even Merchant Scroll is on here? Jeez. So Mana Vault, a card that everyone complains about, is only a 1 on here. Soul Ring is a 4, guys. That's how much better it is. That's because Mana Vault, almost, like I say all the time, Mana Vault is almost just a ritual. It's a colorless ritual. I almost never see people actually untap it. It has a horrible downside. Soul Ring has no downside. It untaps every turn, no problem. Mana Vault doesn't untap. You have to pay mana to untap it, and I almost never see people do that. And it also does damage, right? The Moxes are great, of course. Not as good as Soul Ring. Soul Ring is better. I think that I don't even think that's disputable. It adds 2 mana. I mean, everyone plays the first turn scenario in their head. What about every other turn? Soul Ring adds 2 mana every single turn. Mox Jet only adds 1 mana every turn. So every turn the game goes by, Soul Ring gets exponentially better. It's absurd card, absolutely absurd. Anyway, Ancestral Recall is the highest here. Obviously, if you're not familiar with these cards, I 1 blue mana, draw 3 cards. Of course, this card is insane. But man, I would not put this. This actually surprised me that this was the only card that was an 8. They have this as the highest. I guess maybe because it's just so easy to shoehorn into your deck, they want to discourage people from doing so. Maybe. I don't think it's a massive game breaker. It just draw 3 cards, I mean, that's my opinion on it. I mean, it's obviously really good, but compared to what other things are happening here, a lot of these cards will just completely break the game open or win you the game, right? That's my thinking. It's so funny that Fourth Aerlingus is on here. Isn't it? Of all the absurdly busted cards in the history of the game, this funny card from Lord of the Rings that is, I think it creates night tokens or something, that's on here. This, by far, this is the new. Like, look at how old all these cards. They're all super old. Maybe Dig Through Time's not really really old. Gifts Ungiven. Like, there's a couple that are modern era. A couple, not many, but almost all of these are super old. I guess Spellseeker would be another one that is newish. Thassa's Oracle, obviously. I mean, Underworld Breach, right? Obviously, busted cards. Combo potential, right? That would be the big one here. Easily the newest card on here is it's just a funny card that for that, I guess it's just so good they had to add it onto this list. Obviously a lot of tutors. You see a lot of tutors on here. The other thing that for me, again, it just grabs me is Time Vault is only a 7. This card is insane. It is, I mean, again, if you're not familiar with it, I'll throw these cards on screen if you're not familiar with them. All you need is an untapper and you get infinite turns. That's it. How hard is that? How many ways are there to untap a Time Vault? Right? That's all you need. I can't believe this is only a 7 because it is in my opinion, the easiest card ever printed to combo and win. It's even easier than Kiki Jiki, which that's not on here either, right? Yeah, like just all you need is something to untap it and you just get infinite turns. So Tinker is another one that I'm shocked it's only a 3 because you can do some pretty insane things with that as well. But I guess, I mean, you can't really build around Tinker though, right? You can't, I mean, you could, but how do you, it's going to be hard to build around a card in the 99 because again, they're making it difficult to, like, I can Vampiric Tutor to go get my Tinker, right? I guess. So they're making, that's what I see when I look at this list. Strip Mine's kind of an interesting one. When I look at this list, what I see is they are applying points to certain cards to just because they're really powerful, but also, again, cards like Flash and stuff like Gifts Ungiven. Again, Gifts Ungiven, only a 1. Intuition, a 1, same thing. And again, as a lot of people pointed out, Intuition and Gifts Ungiven, very similar. So one banned and the other not. So it's mostly absurd power level, but also comboing, tutoring, combo potential, stuff like that. Mana Drain's another interesting one, right? So some of the things I'm looking at on this list are the cards that are banned in the Commander format that they don't have on this list. Obviously, there's a bunch of those. I mean, again, it's a 2-player format that plays into it. A card like Limited Resources would be not nearly as good in here as it is in the Commander format. That card obviously intended to be played in a 2-player format. It wasn't intended to be played in multiplayer format. Sure, okay. But obviously there's a lot of cards here that are banned in the Commander format that they allow and just apply points to. And again, for me, I'm looking at a card like Ancestral Recall that is 8 points banned in the Commander format. And then a card like Gifts Ungiven, that's it's only 1 point. Right? And I agree. I don't think Gifts Ungiven should not be banned in Commander. Absolutely not. The other thing is the cards that they have on here that aren't banned. Again, that's the other thing. I'm like, Demonic Tutor, guys, that's an insanely powerful card. Insanely powerful. Not banned in the Commander format. Again, they don't ban based on power level, though, right? I had a guy tell me that it's all about keeping the commander format fun. So they want to get away from the unfun. Like, what's unfun about Gifts Ungiven? That's a super fun card, in my opinion. Mana Drain is another one that grabs me. Like, this card is really powerful, and again, another card that a lot of people would consider to be not casual. You know, when I hear a lot of groans often when I see it in a casual game. Obviously, they've applied points to it. Ultimately, again, funny enough for me, Natural Order. That is a powerful card. I put it in my Tishana deck so long ago. It's really good there. It's not like I'm getting a Crater Hoof or anything with it. It is a good card, obviously, because you can, it is a very limited, it is a very not so limited tutor, so it is certainly good. Natural Order, I have Soul Ring in just my Omarthus deck because it is a colorless deck, and I have Spellseeker in a couple of decks. And that is it. That's the only cards. Again, how many cards do you guys have on this list in your commander decks? That also would be interesting to know. If you were counting up your commander decks, and again, for me, the only card, all my decks would be zeros. I don't have Demonic Tutor in any decks. None. Nope. Mana Crypt 0. I don't even play Merchant Scroll again. It's funny they have Merchant Scroll on here. That's a card that doesn't even really see play in the commander format much anymore. I have Mystical Tutor and none. Yeah. So the only cards I'm playing, funny enough, are these three right in a row here. Don't play Treasure Cruise. Nope. Okay. So yeah, again, my Omarthus deck is oh man, is my Omarthus deck have the highest points total here? Because it's a 4? That would be funny. Spellseeker, again, I believe I might have Spellseeker in my Tishana deck. So I have Spellseeker in my Tishana deck and my Abishon deck and my Denic deck. So my Denic deck would be a 2. My Abishon deck would be a 2. And my Tishana deck would be my most powerful. No, it would also be a 4. So my Tishana deck has Natural Order and Spellseeker, so it would be a 4, and my Omarthus deck would be a 4. I think it's interesting. Again, it's a neat way to do it. I mean, obviously it would have to be, you couldn't use this list because again, a card like Dockside Extortionist would probably be worth like what, 5 points? I mean, that would be an interesting thought experiment, right? If you were doing this, because of course the commander format is way different than a 2-player format like this. So what would you give a points rating to for a Dockside Extortionist? That would be a good example of a card of, okay, in commander, if we did this, what would Dockside Extortionist be as far as points? I think 5, because it is super, super powerful and it is easy to go off. That would put it ahead of Soul Ring. On par with Mana Crypt. I think that's fair. Yeah, I think for me, probably Dockside would be a 5. What do you guys think? You can let me know in the comments below and let me know where you're like, that's the part that I actually like almost better is it's a power level rating, right? And funny enough, if you play on X-Mage, they will do that sometimes. They will just very generalized gauge the power level of your deck based on how many tutors you have, how many mana rocks, like cheap mana rocks, the mana positive ones, obviously. That's something that we could actually start doing. That's where this point system, I know it'll never be used for the ban list, but you could start using this as a rating system for power level where you could have all your cards, all the really powerful cards, again, Dockside and whatever counter spells or draw spells you think, Rhystic Study, right? Smothering Tithe, the typical, Cyclonic Rift, obviously, whatever you think needs to be on there, you could have those cards based on a point system just to figure out what the power level of your deck is so that you could say, hey, my deck is an 8. The system we have now for power level is just whatever I think. It's not actually based on it. It's not based on any metrics at all. This is actually based on some numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I like seeing the actual numbers. So if you were using this and you had, say, a Mana Crypt, that's a 5, and you had a Demonic Tutor, that's a 3, your deck is an 8, right? Just from those 2 cards. And that doesn't mean, again, not comparing to the power list we already have. That doesn't mean your deck is an 8 compared to what power level we're using now, which is I'm just guessing power level. No, you would have decks that were like 15s and 16s and 20s. Because they would have a whole bunch of these. They would have Soul Ring, Spellseeker, right? I mean, a lot of commander decks have a Soul Ring, Spellseeker. That's 6. Throw a Mana Crypt in there, you're at 11. Throw a Demonic Tutor in there, you're at 14 already, right? So a lot of decks would be way over 10. A lot of decks would. And obviously, of course, there would have to be a lot of cards added to this list. So It's an interesting thought experiment that I thought, people brought it up. I thought I would take a look at the list. I think it's interesting. That is all. Please don't freak out at me in the comments below because how dare you? This would never work with Commander. Don't say it would never work. It would work if you made it work, right? I don't think the system now is great. The system for both banning cards and the system for the power level discussion, both to me are completely broken. And I think this is a way to both correct it, not necessarily fix it, but I think it is a better way to go about that process. Obviously, it would be way different. I'm just giving this as an example because Canadian Highlander actually does that. It would have to be way different. And who would decide? The rules committee? I don't know. The power level one is really interesting. And that is one where, obviously the rules committee has nothing to do with that. The rules committee just decides which cards are banned and not. So someone out there, some ambitious person, and no, it's not going to be me, but some ambitious person out there could go out there and actually make a power level points list like this, where, okay, Dockside Extortionist is worth 5, Rhystic Study is worth, 4 or 6 or whatever you think. Soul Ring is worth whatever it is, right? And that way I come to a game and someone says, hey, what's the power level of your deck? I say, it's a 3, right? And there's like, oh, mine's a 16, or something. It's like, oh, okay. At least you get an idea, a more accurate idea, because of course the power level system we have now is just whatever I think my deck is, which is of course completely meaningless. You guys let me know in the comments below what you think. I think it's an interesting discussion to be had. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.